economy. That's Protestant superstition. All right, let's get started. Hello and welcome to the Regrettable Century. We are back with part 2 of our close reading of the Kolakowski essay titled "The Concept of the Left." It's really stupid where we stopped off on this one. It's like 2 paragraphs before the end of a section. So what we're going to do is jump in and finish these last 2 paragraphs, and then that'll close out the section. That would have been a good place to stop for our last episode, but we didn't choose to stop there.
Well, hopefully this all goes without a hitch today.
Yes. Oh no,
Pearl Harbor Day and my dad's birthday. Happy birthday, Dad.
Happy birthday, Dad. It's and day after my daughter's birthday party, which was a success. It's the first birthday party that she actually really participated in, because the first birthday party she's kind of just like, yeah, sure, I'm here, but this is not really for me.
This one she designed.
Really?
Oh, she did, yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
She we asked her what she wanted at her birthday party, and she has this Sesame Street book that it's called The Count's Party, and the Count counts all the things at his party, like 20 party hats and whatever, so she was like, I want party hats with a ball on the top like the Count has, and then bats. She wanted bats at the party, so we got some bat streamers and put them up, and she wanted watermelon because the Count had watermelon at his party, so we had watermelon. What else?
It was really, really cute.
Chocolate cake. She wanted chocolate cake.
I saw those.
Yep. It's pretty
great.
cool.
They were cupcakes, right?
Well, the one that we got her to blow out was a cupcake because we didn't want her spitting all over everyone's cake. But yeah. Anyway. Oh, so yeah. Obviously, if you haven't listened to the first one, go back and listen to that before you start this one. The desire for revolution cannot be born only when the situation is ripe, because among the conditions for this ripeness are the revolutionary demands made of an unripe reality. The continuous influence of social consciousness is one of the necessary conditions for the maturation of history to the point of radical change. Utopia is a prerequisite for social upheavals, just as unrealistic efforts are the precondition of realistic ones. That is the reason why revolutionary consciousness cannot be satisfied with mere participation in changes already taking place. It cannot merely follow events, but must precede them at a time when they are neither planned nor anticipated.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay, so I kind of feel like this is the unspoken goal of the microsect, right? Just to be unrealistic until it's realistic to be the way that you already are.
That's one way. That's one way of reading it.
Yeah.
I would say
that's a poor application. I would say of.
No, I would say it's a poor application, but I would say this is what the microsect thinks it's doing.
Right.
Like I would say that reading of it is very much like that's even the raison d'être of the microsect. Like I remember in the ISO, we would say these kinds of things to ourselves, be like, don't worry. Even though everything's super bleak and not at all like what we imagine it should be, you have to remember this. And
well, another thing that the microsect is holding on to fiercely is a remembrance of the time in which the Bolsheviks were very few, and those lull periods. And that's kind of a sign of like, oh, but history, there are these great changes where the very few can become the very many in quick order.
I always thought the most realistic goal of our particular microsect was just to be, the witnesses of history, to carry forward the collective memory of the working class, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that, and if nothing else, then we were there to tell somebody who would later tell somebody something that they needed to know in order to one day help make the revolution. I find that to be like the most realistic vision of what any sect in a non-revolution or sect or party, union, collective organization of workers. That's the goal, is to just, like, as we would say, be the manure of history rather than, the plowman.
Yeah, and
I think that's
to some
healthier.
extent, I think to some extent these sects were successful in that, like the ISO was to some degree successful in maintaining a relationship to this history.
Yeah, sure. I would say that, like, it's certainly kept alive a version of politics, and there are some good comrades that came out of the organization, but I think that it did some irreparable damage
Sure.
to the American left as a whole
Mm-hmm.
by kowtowing to shit liberty.
Yeah, like I will always maintain that the ISO was great. Criticisms, qualms aside, the ISO was doing what could be done and what should have been done, all the way
Right.
up until the moment when there was actually a big window that was open for a very long time. It started, it opened in 2011 with the Occupy moment, and then the subsequent things after that with the low wage workers movement, the Bernie Sanders, Shama Sawant, the DSA. The 2011 was a looking glass moment, and the ISO steadfastly refused to go through it. And
Yeah.
from that moment on, they stopped. But until then, yeah, in like 1997, it made sense to join the small sect and to try to find something to do. And obviously, there are things that could have been done differently and better, and all kinds of. But by and large, yes, I would agree, up to a point.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't want to. My experience with that Occupy moment is they didn't want to invest themselves in something they couldn't control.
Right.
And
That's exactly it.
Yeah. But this passage doesn't really, that you just read, Chris, the desire for revolution cannot be born only when the situation is ripe, because among the conditions for this ripeness are the revolutionary demands made of an unripe reality, which I underlined back in 2011. Speaking of Occupy, that doesn't make me think of the ISO. That makes me think of like sort of nuanced ways of going into the labor struggle, and pushing for those reformist labor union fights with a greater horizon. So it's like you're trying to achieve the near goal in order to implant the horizon that is unripe as of yet. But I think that has different places. I think that's true of people in sects. It's true of people not in sects. I think utopia is actually much bigger fish than our particular experience.
All right, I'm going to go to the next one. Therefore, and this is an elementary practical conclusion, the left does not mind being reproached for striving for a utopia. It may have to defend itself against the accusation that some content of its utopia is damaging to society, but it need not defend itself against the charge of being utopian. The right, as a conservative force, needs no utopia. Its essence is the affirmation of existing conditions, a fact and not a utopia, or else the desire to revert to a state which was once an accomplished fact, which to me is a type of utopianism that I think is very motivating for the dissident right.
Yes.
The right strives to idealize actual conditions, not to change them. I think that's also maybe looking at a different version of the right that it exists now.
Yes.
What it needs is fraud, not utopia. Okay, so, yeah, the project of the right. Yeah. The project of the right, as it exists today, is in dire need of fraud. And I think that's what the MAGA movement is. The MAGA movement, like, postures as utopian and just, reinforces the status quo. And that's not the goal of all right-wing movements, and I think that that's what a lot of Marxists would say about dissident right-wing movements, or especially fascism, is that it's just like a mechanism of capital to reinforce itself. I think that that's what capital intends to use fascism as, but that's not the goal of fascism itself.
Yeah, I think like when you if you spend any time thinking about and reading about the stuff that animated the early fascists in Italy, to not only on a foreign policy scale to like reforge the Roman Empire, to recapture the glory of Italy, which is also it's myth, of course, but it's harkening back to something. But then also like to resolve the tension between classes with a corporatist social contract. I would say that's a version of utopian. It's not a very good one, but it's
Right.
it's still utopian. I think that it's this. I disagree with this, but also on the same by the same token, though, like the left very much is in today's terms all about idealizing and making ideal existing conditions rather than overturning them. So there's a lot of slippage in the way these terms are used in a given historical juncture. So to make some allowance, to make some allowance for that, I think is important.
I think the way that he characterizes the right is often, I mean, that's one of the ways in which this is an artifact of history, this text. But
sure,
I mean, I think his emphasis on the dialectic of utopianism, of utopia and the real, is profound. One of the things I've learned a lot from you, Chris, from all of you, is just like when we've been talking about like the early period that you referenced, Jason, of fascism, when it was sort of a influx and made up of syndicalism and made up of all of these people who were amenable to Marxism. And then we talked about the Georges Sorel. There's definitely they're not ceasing to be utopian when they cross over and join the fascist ranks, right? There's still a utopian horizon. I don't really know how fascism could even have become a thing without it. It seems like it's a necessary element.
Yeah, I mean, and like if you look at the fascists as they conceived of themselves in the early days of the Italian fascist movement, right? Like Mussolini wanted to ally with the right wing of the Socialist Party and create a bloc of national socialists to develop Italy, to invoke a developmentalist project that would pull Italy into the upper ranks of European societies and make itself into a thriving, prosperous society. That, and then of course to reassert its like nationalist vision of reclaiming a lost Italian territory from the Austrians and the Yugoslavs, et cetera, create a new Roman Empire. That is a utopian vision. It's a bleak utopian vision, but it is utopian.
Yeah.
And I think that it's utopian in the negative sense, like the place that cannot be, right? Because you cannot balance that lust for conquest with the actual taking care of one's own people that Mussolini claimed to have wanted to do.
Right.
No Great Society and Vietnam, right?
Right.
Right.
The same thing could be said just with more extremes on either side about the utopianism of the Nazis. It's utopianism. It's abhorrent, but it's very much it's almost the opposite of the idealization or the idealization of actual conditions.
Mm-hmm.
They very much were trying to transcend the actual conditions. They didn't do a good job, but I would say they were very utopian.
Well, that's also, this is just we can move on, but Frederick Jameson has that statement about how underlying every dystopia is a utopia or an unrealized utopia. So there's also a relationship there that perhaps could be used when looking at fascism.
Sure. All right. The left cannot give up on utopia because it is a real force even when it is merely a utopia. The 16th century revolt of the German peasants, the Baubuwist movement, the Paris Commune were all utopian. As it turns out, without such utopian activities, no non-utopian progressive social change would have ever taken place. Obviously, it does not follow that the task of the left is to undertake extreme actions in every historical situation. All we are saying is that to condemn utopia for the mere fact that it is a utopia is rightist, conservative, and hampers the prospect of ever creating a utopia. In any event, we are not at the moment formulating social tasks. We are considering the concept of the left completely in the abstract, trying to ascertain and not to postulate. Since the left is a normal social phenomenon, as normal a social phenomenon as the right, and progressive social movements are as normal as reactionary ones, it is equally normal for the left, which is a minority, to be persecuted by the right. Sure. I don't really have anything to say about that. Okay, so this is where we should have stopped last time. This is how you can tell that this is dated, because leftists cared about social class back then. The concept of the left remains unclear to this day. Although only 150 years old, it has acquired a universal historical dimension and is applied to ancient history by virtue of a diffusion of meaning common to all languages. Broadly used, the term has a practical function, but its meaning becomes very obscure, more sensed than understood. One thing is certain, it is easier to say which movements, programs, and attitudes are left in relation to others than to determine where the left ends and where the right begins in political power relationship within society's total structure. We speak of a left within Hitler's party, but that does not, of course, mean that the German right was restricted to the party right and that everything else, including the left wing of that party, was the left in an absolute sense. Society cannot be divided into right and left. A leftist attitude towards one moment can be linked with a rightist attitude towards another. It is only in their relative meanings that those words make sense. All right, Jason has been making this point for a couple of years now.
This is my point. If there's a single point, it's that when he says society cannot be divided into a right and a left, that's true, and I don't know why we do it. We just can't.
Yeah.
The left and the right of the French Revolution, and thus of the forces of the bourgeoisie in political power, that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. There is no broader transhistorical left. There's not like, you hear people say all the time, like, I'm not liberal, I'm left. We have liberals, and then we have conservatives, and then we have the left. It's like, it just becomes extremely unclear. And so, like, I know what people are trying to say, but most people don't. And also, I don't even think that they're right a lot of times. I think a lot of times when people insist upon this distinction, they're really saying, I am an advocate of more left-wing versions of what the liberals are in favor of.
Right.
And that's it. And it's like, that's not good enough.
I suppose if we're being most generous, what people mean when they say I am a leftist and not a liberal is they're distinguishing their political horizons from the liberalism we're stuck in.
Sure. I've heard it say that, like, what differentiates leftists from liberals is anti-capitalism. And I was like, wow, wait until you hear about right-wing anti-capitalism.
Right,
exactly. Blow your mind.
Yeah, that actually doesn't clarify things when it's put that way.
No.
But I think if you were to clarify, okay, my horizon of the future, what I would desire after the revolution and so on, that would get closer. But then again, the sole identification is to a pure utopia.
Yeah, that's true.
Hello, everyone. It's Chris, just dropping in to remind you that we have a Patreon. On our Patreon, we post 4 extra episodes a month, 2 of which are bonus episodes, and the other 2 are geopolitics episodes. You also get access to our Discord community, which has a zone for social interaction, but it's also where we plan and discuss our reading groups. So if you'd like to be part of our reading group, or just part of our community, please join the Discord. We've also got a merch store. We have a couple of t-shirt designs up, and you can pick what color t-shirt you want, whether you want short sleeve or long sleeve, or we have a couple of different styles of t-shirt that you can pick from. So if you'd like to help us out by throwing a few dollars our way via merch, please head on over to the link which is in our Patreon bio and in the show notes. Lastly, remember to like and subscribe and leave a review on your favorite podcatching app. All that stuff does all the magical internet things that drive people towards listening to our podcast. So, helps out. Okay, back to the show. All right. But what do we mean when we say a movement or attitude is left in relation to another? More specifically, which aspect of the concept of the left is valid in all social situations? For example, what do we mean when we speak of the left in the Radical Party of France, or in the Social Democratic or Catholic or Communist left? Is there some common element in the words used in such varied contexts? Or are we simply stating that every political situation reveals some human activity we either approve of or find to be less repugnant, and which we therefore will call left? I say we call, he says in quotes, because the left draws the dividing line between the left and the right, while the right fights this division systematically and in vain, for the left's self-definition is strong enough to define the right, and in any event, to establish the existence of the demarcation line.
What do you think of this? I'm not sure about this.
I almost think it's the reverse these days. It's almost the opposite.
Yeah, I definitely think it's the reverse.
Like, I forget which is this comedian, what his name is, but he said, you go to a gathering of conservatives, right wingers, and they'll say, "Hey, I'm a Republican. I'm whatever. I'm of the right," and they're like, "Hey, welcome aboard." But then you go to a left wing gathering, of liberals. They say, "Oh, yeah, I'm a Democrat. I'm of the left," and they'll say, "We'll see."
Well, honestly, I think that's dated too, especially considering the MAGA civil war that's happening right now.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah.
Is
Yeah,
it
I mean,
about?
No,
would
you
say-
can't. You can't even say, "Oh, I'm not just a Republican. I'm MAGA," because even MAGA is like, if you're really MAGA, doesn't that mean that you oppose the president?
Yeah, there's an interesting thing going on in the right now, which is actually a division between a sort of protectionist and isolationist and borderline anti-imperialist, depending on which rightist you're talking about, right? And of course, just neocons wearing MAGA hats, right?
You can also define it based purely on sovereignty, on like American
Sure.
sovereignty, which
Yeah.
you don't have. You can be a fucking moderate Republican and see that argument.
Yeah, sure.
Who
sure.
was the Republican presidential candidate who said you could hear a giant sucking sound? He's referring to NAFTA.
No, it wasn't a Republican
Perot.
candidate.
He was
it was an independent.
Oh,
Yeah.
so I'm that's the wrong person. Then I'm not thinking of Prosper. Oh, it's Pat Buchanan.
Okay. Yeah.
It's like Pat Buchanan is kind of reemerged. The spirit of Pat Buchanan it's like
Sure.
a paleoconservative
Paleocons.
right, which is it's funny because they're much more ascendant and much more coherent and self-aware than I think a lot of the DSA Bernie types within the broad left camp of liberals, whatever. But also it's brand new, so who knows? Like within a year, it might be come to naught as well.
Yeah, so even within that movement, there is like a demarcation between like sort of libertarian and those who don't eschew collectivism of some sort, right?
Yeah, that's true.
Um, like, I mean, when I say collectivism, I use the term very, very, very loosely. Like, I'd say that there's Ron Paul and Rand Paul and whoever else is in Congress that's a libertarian type.
There
And
aren't
then
very
there's
many of them.
no, but then there's like Tucker Carlson. It doesn't fit within that. Like, I mean, he's very much so come out as sort of a soft uh, supporter of social democratic programs to help the working class. You know, for the white working class, the white Christian working class, right? Herrenvolk social democracy. I've heard it referred to as. But like, yeah, that's very different from like Rand Paul and the free trade absolutists, who Tucker Carlson actually says is like, if they got their way, that they would hasten the destruction of the country faster than the liberals would. Uh, but is allied with them against like APAC and forever wars and whatever else.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, I don't know. I think that everyone always wants to talk about the other side as though it's monolithic, and it never is.
Right. I do think maybe his schematic, his schema is closer to being real during the period of the communist movement worldwide.
Yeah.
When you have like the Red Scare, I do think there's that's literally how the right, when sort of you're combining the Wall Street and religious conservatives and John Birchers, and it's all around anti-communism. That's like that's the glue that holds them all together.
Yep. Okay.
No doubt.
No doubt, because it has taken on a positive aura. The term left is often appropriated by reactionary groups. For example, there is the, quote, European left, a political annex of the European coal and steel community. So the mere use of the word does not define the left. We must look for other signposts to help us fix our position in this murky area. Slogans like freedom and equality belong, of course, to the tradition of the left, but they lost their meaning once they became universal catchwords to which everyone attaches his own arbitrary interpretation. As time passes, the left must define itself ever more precisely. For the more it influences social consciousness, the more its slogans take on a positive aura, the more they are appropriated by the right and lose their defined meaning. Nobody today opposes such concepts as freedom and equality. That is why they can become implements of fraud, suspect unless they are explained. Which is worse, the word socialism has also acquired many meanings. Yes, it has. Especially since it's become so popular in the United States. It almost doesn't really mean anything anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Naturally, it is quite easy to define the left in general terms, as we can define progress, but general definitions are necessarily misleading and difficult to apply in concrete discussions. For example, we can say that leftness is the degree of participation in the process of social development that strives to eliminate all conditions in which the possibility of satisfying human needs is obstructed by social relations. That one just rolls off the tongue, huh? From such a definition, we derive a certain number of equally general slogans that are too universally acceptable to be useful in fixing political demarcations. The concepts of the left of progress and of freedom are full of internal contradictions. Mm-hmm. Political disputes do not arise from the mere acceptance or rejection of concepts.
Yep.
Yeah, like the concept of progress. I'm not so. I don't think that's at all void of contradictions or
right.
That isn't a. What do I want to say? It's not. That is not a concrete enough thing. Like, if you're for progress, you're for, then you are of the left or whatever. Because, like,
isn't Peter Thiel for progress?
Yeah, exactly.
I hate his progress. You know what?
Yeah, well, turns out I hate most people's definition of progress.
Yeah.
The
anti-modernist theme of this show. This last. The concepts of the left of progress and of freedom are full of internal contradictions. political disputes do not arise from the mere acceptance or rejection of the concepts makes me think immediately of the American Revolution, which is on my mind because I've been watching the Ken Burns. Like, on the left, there's an appreciation, at least there used to be, of the American Revolution. Verso republishes Jefferson in its little pamphlet series, and Paine. There's a leftist vision or version of this history, and it's important, right? But there's also other people who have stake in what it means, because some of these founding documents are necessarily vague at first. So that's the first thing that comes to my mind.
Yeah.
I do find it very interesting that Jefferson initially wanted to reference slavery in the Declaration of Independence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, he knew what he was doing was fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see. Therefore, rather than construct an easy, though ineffective general concept of the left applicable to all eras, let us accept existing social reality as a fact and look for the basic conflicts that define current history. There are, first of all, class conflicts and secondarily political ones. What?
Sorry, I like this sentence. Let us accept existing social reality as fact. It's like, yeah, let's do that.
That's a good idea. These are, first of all, class conflicts and secondarily political ones. However, the political battle is not completely identical with the pattern of class relations. It is not a carbon copy of them transposed to relations between political parties. This is so because class diversions are not the only kind, and classes themselves are becoming more rather than less complicated because they are split from within by nationality or ideology. Finally, there are political divisions insofar as they assume diverse forms of autonomy. Under these conditions, political life cannot reflect class conflicts purely and directly, but on the contrary, ever more indirectly and confusedly. As a matter of fact, it has never been otherwise. If it had been, all historical conflicts would have been resolved centuries ago. That is why the statement that it must be in the interest of the working class to belong to the left does not always hold true. On the other hand, it is the characteristic of the left to try not to realize the men's wishes against their will, nor to force them to accept benefits they do not desire. On the other hand, the working class of a given country may be greatly influenced by nationalism, yet the left will not support nationalistic demands. Elsewhere, the working class may have deep roots in a religious tradition, yet the left is a secular movement. Even real immediate interests of the working class can be in opposition to the demands of the left. For example, for a long time, the English workers benefited from colonial exploitation, and yet the left is an enemy of colonialism.
Okay, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah. We could put an asterisk by almost every sentence in here.
Exactly.
Like, the left will not support nationalistic demands. Does that mean that the French Communist Party has not been the left? The left is a secular movement. Does that mean that I'm not of the left?
The Sandinista Revolution?
The left is an enemy of colonialism. Does that mean that big sections of the Second International were actually of the right? They just were also for socialism? Again, it's like, that's whatever. This left and right, they stop being very helpful if you try to define them too much.
Yep. I mean, as a vague signifier, it's fine.
Sure.
If you're a person that doesn't really need to have things clarified for you, and you could, like in a conversation with a normie, I'll be like, yeah, sure, I'm a leftist. I have a collectivist vision of society and equality, and I'm an anti-imperialist, blah, blah, blah. Sure, I'm a leftist, right? But, if I'm talking to another leftist, it's going to get more detailed than that. Or if I'm talking to a rightist, it's going to get more detailed than that.
Yeah. I think this paragraph, or at least the second half of it, is just through and through a litany of new left statements.
Yeah, I was talking to somebody, not recently, whatever. I was talking to somebody, and they said, like, I'm just like so sick of all these, just everything's so lefty. All these leftists being like concerned about like making sure you have the right pronouns and gender, and you have to do like acknowledgement, like you have to say like, oh, we're sorry that we stole this land. It's like, fine, you want to think all these things, fine, but like I'm just concerned with making regular people prosperous, and we don't give all our money to bankers and these big corporate owners that own everything. And in that moment I did not say, oh, actually you are a leftist. Instead I said, yeah, because I felt like that was more useful to talk about, like, the things we want to achieve, and how we might achieve them. And we even also both agreed that both political parties are only going to sell us out. And I think that depending on who you're talking to, basically I agree with you, Chris. But I feel like I rarely ever these days find many reasons to employ and to defend the term leftist.
In a way, this passage Chris just read is like providing a perfect example of how he's arguing that the left is not tailing the working class in all ways. And we can respond by saying, okay, well, we need not be the left in all ways, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, whenever, just my example of left-wing nationalism. I don't know. Did he write this? When did he write this? When is this from? Like, is he like blowing off third world nationalism? Like, is he just ignoring it wholesale?
I mean, I think he. When did he write? Let's see. 1966.
Okay, he's in the throes of like the popularity of left-wing nationalism.
I mean, it's also the case that even if he wrote this in like 1934, the Spanish Republican movement, is that not left-wing enough? Even though they're like armed by like
no.
Yeah, okay, fine. But like the Communist Party, the Socialist Party, smaller left-wing parties, like left-wing parties within that, like they were very much trying to mobilize on the basis of national sentiment. It's like, we want to go beyond that, sure, but they were trying to use it, and I think that they should have.
So the anarchists were so against the concept of taking power that they gave power in Catalonia to the liberals, who just turned it over to the fascists. And that's like the shining hour, the shining moment of anarchism in practice is Catalonia in the 1930s.
Yeah. Even though I would hold Nestor Makhno above that in some regards. Yeah. But
whenever Nestor Makhno was expropriating grain and the peasants asked to be paid for it, and he said, "Money is fake, dude."
Yeah.
And and then the peasants were like, join the Bolsheviks and help them kill Makhno, or not kill Makhno, but kill the anarchists. Makhno was just trash, dude. Just there's nothing redeemable about the Makhnovishina.
Okay. In
my opinion, sorry. I've got a good article. I was actually an ISR article about the Makhnovist movement, and it's just, of course, it's just anarcho warlordism.
Yeah,
with very little organization of society, and doing all the same things that the whites did, that the Bolsheviks were propagandized about, and doing all the same things that the Bolsheviks did that the whites propagandized about. It's just the worst of both worlds. There's no stability like the Bolsheviks or the whites provided, but then also expropriation of grain and impressing peasants to fight in the war and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean,
maybe I'm wrong.
I do think that there's this sort of mythos around Makhno that is overblown by leftists, especially American leftists, because we just love like a renegade, like a cowboy, a guy that's riding around on the horse telling the government to go fuck itself, right? Yeah. We love that shit in America. But anyway,
militarily, there were some victories of note.
Oh yeah, there were absolutely. There were some there was some effective, crazy Cossack style tactics that were effective for sure. And also, there was a lot of anti-Semitism among the Makhnovishina, you know.
Yeah.
And I'm not going to say there was none among the Bolsheviks, but it was official policy among the Bolsheviks to not be anti-Semitic.
The
And I don't
Bolsheviks,
know if there was official policy among the Makhnovists.
the Bolsheviks were more woke than the Makhnovists.
They were. They were more leftist because they were more woke.
Oh, one thing I was going to say, last thing I was going to say about this contentious passage we're in the midst of is being very generous. We could say this is like dialogically useful at looking at the tension between left and any given historical situation, be it the nation or religion. I just think we draw different conclusions than he does.
Yeah.
Sure. All right. This is why the left cannot be defined by saying it will always, in every case, support every demand of the working class, or that it is always on the side of the majority. The left must define itself on the level of ideas, conceding that in many instances it will find itself in the minority, even though in today's world there is no leftist attitude independent of the struggle for the rights of the working class, though no leftist position can be realized outside of the class structure, and though only the struggle of the oppressed can make the left a material force, nevertheless the left must be defined in intellectual and not class terms. This presupposes that concrete intellectual life is not and cannot be an exact replica of class interests.
I.e. Lenin's emphasis on not being beholden to the trade unions.
On this basis, we can set forth certain characteristics of the position of the left in various social orders. In capitalist countries, the fight of the left is to abolish all social privilege. In non-capitalist countries, it is to remove privilege that have grown out of the non-capitalist conditions. In capitalist countries, the left fights all forms of colonial oppression. In non-capitalist ones, it demands the abolition of inequalities, discrimination, and the exploitation of certain countries by others. In capitalist countries, the left struggles against limitations on freedom of speech and expression. It does so also in non-capitalist lands. In one and the other, the left fights all the contradictions of freedom that arise from both kinds of social conditions. How far can one push the demand for tolerance without turning against the idea of tolerance itself? And how can one guarantee that tolerance will not lead to the victory of the forces that will strangle the principle of tolerance? This is the great problem of all leftist movements. It is also true, obviously, that the left can make mistakes and act ineffectively, and thus engender a situation that is inimical to itself. However, it is not faulty tactics that are the distinguishing feature of the left, for, as we have said, its criteria are established on an ideological plane.
I mean, yeah, the bit about tolerance, I think, was important in debates around Stalinism and other states.
Right.
I don't know that we can say it is today of the same importance, but
No.
I kind of feel like he's basically saying, he's trying to make a distinction. The left in capitalist countries versus the left in non-capitalist countries. But he's really just kind of saying the same thing in both. The left in a non-capitalist country demands the abolition of inequalities and discrimination and so on, and an exploitation of certain countries by others. But in the capitalist countries, the left fights all forms of colonial oppression. It's really not that great of a distinction.
It sounds very degenerated worker state-esque to me.
Yeah. I kind of think that, like, the idea of tolerance, I think in capitalist societies, in our society now, when looking at this, we have to have an absolutist, free speech absolutism, right? And we have to advocate for complete tolerance for all viewpoints, because even the ones as innocuous as like, well, we can't allow racism to happen. Look at how the right has used anti-racism to kick people out of their jobs in universities for opposing the genocide in Israel or in Gaza, So it's like, if you give the capitalists an inch, they're going to use it to repress us. So I mean, the left must always be free speech absolutists, I think. And
Yeah, I think that's true.
I wouldn't have held that position always.
Yeah, I mean, I think that before the Me Too era and before before the Biden presidency and then the second Trump presidency, I would have taken a kind of a more of like a Karl Popper,
Yeah,
you know,
paradox of tolerance position.
yeah.
That's how you
But
knew
now-
you were wrong, if you were agreeing with Karl Popper about something.
Yeah. Now I would definitely say that I am a free speech absolutist. No matter how abhorrent, I think people should be allowed to say stuff, because I think that I think that all of the problems that we have, the gripes that we have, the issues that we have with the society that we live in right now, they are all downstream of us having nothing to gravitate toward, nothing to orient toward. We have no North Star. We have no great hope. They have no cause. We have no meaning. And so that's why, like, when people say, "Oh, AI is just a tool," it's like, well, that would be a really good thing to say, and I even might agree with you, if there was some notion that our society, that America was tending toward this generalized thing, and that we were disagreeing on how to get there. But in the absence of this general sense of purpose, these mechanisms, these institutions which help root us and coordinate something, instead all we have are just the little fights that we pick with about all the little details. And in that situation, yes, obviously something like AI, I would say obviously something like AI is purely destructive.
So the first thing I think of in this passage, how far can one push the demand for tolerance without turning against the idea of tolerance itself? And how can one guarantee that tolerance will not lead to the victory of forces that will strangle the principle of tolerance? I immediately think of a worker state or a socialist state, and dealing with people who do not prescribe to that vision. I think of the dictatorship of the proletariat. Thinking about this is where I think maybe he is drawing a distinction. Thinking about that in our society, which is the furthest thing from the dictatorship of the proletariat, is very different. Tolerance has a different meaning entirely.
Well, and also, like, right now, tolerance is kind of negative. Like, that's all you're doing is tolerating. You're not accepting, you're not celebrating.
That's the old Zizek line,
Yeah.
right? Tolerance is a way to keep the neighbor at a distance. Anyway.
Yeah, I think that's like semantic, sort of just nitpicking. You know?
That's what he does.
Yeah. It's sort of like, you're for equality. What about equity? You know?
Right.
Like, fuck off. How about that?
Yeah, that is the most annoying thing.
Yeah. Anyway, in capitalist countries, the left strives to secularize social life. This is also true in non-capitalist countries. In capitalist countries, the destruction of all racism is an essential part of the left's position. This is so in non-capitalist countries as well. Everywhere the left fights against the encroachment of any type of obscurantism in social life. It fights for the victory of the rational thought, which is by no means a luxury reserved for intellectuals, but an integral component of social progress in this century. Without it, any form of progress becomes a parody of its own premises.
Yeah, I don't really have anything to say. I just that just makes me want to. I have like a frown.
It makes you want to be
viscerally cringe when I hear people say something about the fight for rationalization and.
I think I would generously responding say that this means we need to be able to frame reality according to political economy and according to materialist conception of history. But of course, the obscurantism, I have problems with that. And the presumption of what secularism means. But I think we three are persons of faith, and we do have a certain kind of vision of society where there is a secularization of social
Sure.
forms. But everything's being pronounced in such a cheap and easy way.
Yeah, I mean, like, to me, I feel like fighting for the victory of rational thought is that really something that we're like that we as the left really need to double down on? Like, join forces with the Christopher Hitchens and the Sam Hydes of the world and fight against obscurantism? You know, I mean, this is fighting for the victory of rational thought is, I mean, fight for the victory of the working class. And it seems like rational thought, you know, will coincide with that. I just don't see there to be a necessary, like, second pole here that is like rational thought. We're pro rational thought and the working class or whatever, you know.
It's about to get worse.
We will go all the way to the rational thought point with Bill Maher. But then after that, we have to go further.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. Like, I just want to.
This is a relic. That's a relic of a different time, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Well, speaking of progress becomes a parody of its own premises, I think you couldn't utter a name more appropriate to that than Bill Maher.
Right.
Yeah.
Finally, under both systems, the left does not exclude the use of force when necessary, though the use of force is not an invention of the left, but rather an unavoidable form of social existence. The left accepts the antinomy of force, but only as an antinomy and not as a gift of fate. Everywhere the left is ready to compromise with historical facts, but it rejects ideological compromises. That is, it does not abdicate to the right to proclaim the basic tenets of its existence, regardless of its political tactics.
I don't think
what
that's
that even
true.
means, really.
The left rejects ideological compromise, and it does not abdicate the right to proclaim the basic tenets of existence, regardless of. Yeah,
The
I
left
just don't think.
definitely does reject ideological compromise. Except for when it's making ideological compromises and calling it ideological rigidity. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, I
I
feel
don't
like
think that's a good thing, though.
this whole series, basically this whole page is the left is this, the left is that, the left is this. This is like very aspirational on the part of the author, not even on the part of a section of a given political movement. Just Kolakowski thinks this is what should be, and that's about it.
It reminds me of the love is patient, love is kind.
Yeah.
Well, the context is that he's a Polish communist dissident, right?
Yeah.
So context is probably will help us understand what he means.
All right. The left is free of sacred feelings. It has no sense of sanctity towards any existing historical situation. It takes a position of permanent revisionism towards reality, just as the right assumes an attitude of opportunism in respect to the world as it is. The right is the embodiment of the inertia of historical reality. That is why it is as eternal as the left. In both systems, the left strives to base its prospects on the experience and evolutionary tendencies of history, whereas the right is the expression of capitulation to the situation of the moment. For this reason, the left can have a political ideology, while the right has nothing but tactics.
Damn.
Wow. That actually, to me, all of these criticisms he's making of the right, you could make of the left today.
Yeah. One thing I think I agree entirely. I will say that the first sentence here, the left is free of sacred feelings and has no sense of sanctity toward any existing historical situation. Yeah, that's true. I just think that's a bad thing.
I don't know. Have you ever tried to criticize Stalin to a Stalinist?
Oh yeah. Oh, yeah. You know what? Okay, good. That's a fair point.
Have you ever tried to criticize the Bolsheviks to a Trotskyist? Have you ever tried to criticize any anarchist to any other anarchist? You know, I mean, that's not true. It's absolutely false.
Yeah, actually, that's funny.
Yeah.
Somehow it just all of those examples escaped my attention at the moment. But yes, you're entirely correct.
Have you ever tried to criticize punching the homeless to someone who supports Gavin Newsom?
Again, I think you're right. It's all of this is aspirational. It's like a normative left, right? Normative, rational left. And obviously, every single iteration of a leftist or communist or socialist has its sacred cow.
Yeah.
Yep.
And, you know, online...
He's extolling the virtues of the Platonic ideal form of the left.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, speaking of these sacred cows, Stalin's having a return to the spotlight on my Instagram for some reason.
Oh man, there is an entire section of the online left that I don't think has actually interacts with other humans. That is really into Stalin. Maybe they interact with other humans like on the internet, but not in real life. Like I'm in a couple of Facebook groups and follow a couple of Instagram pages that are like, you know, pro BRICS, pro multipolarity groups, and those people just fucking love Stalinism. It's very weird. It's just like I don't know how that happened.
It kind of makes sense to me. Like in the absence of something,
Right?
to serve as to orient people. Social democracy had a return, and now Stalin has a return to glory because there's some fantasy idealization of a past where we did things. We were on the move. We were accomplishing things back when the right people were in power and whatever. And so that makes sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I just don't understand how they got tied so closely to the multipolarity movement, you know? Like, I don't know. It seemed, I remember Stalinists and Maoists being so critical of Russia and China previously, and now it's like way there, and now they're just not, you know?
Yeah.
Something flipped.
That part does make a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
I mean, I think maybe part of it is that the KPRF under Zyuganov, they are very Stalin's one of us. That's the period when we industrialized. That's when we beat Hitler. Like those glorious years. That's good. That's part of our history, and it's good. And so, if you are a multipolarity person, a multipolarista, and you see the communists of the other poles saying, yes, Stalin is fine. Stalin is even good. It would make sense that the Anglophone online communists would take that and just turn it up. So yes, that's true, but more.
Well, it makes sense to me that on a purely, like Kevin has said recently, like in the absence of any will to power in your lifetime, you would try and reclaim someone who's the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
It just kind of shows how historically illiterate you are, in my opinion.
All right. Yeah. Within the context of both systems, the left knows that every human freedom satisfies a specific need, but there is also a need for freedom as such. The left does not fear history. It believes in the flexibility of social relations and of human nature, and the possibility of changing them. Within both camps, it rejects all humility vis-a-vis existing situations, authorities, doctrines, and the majority prejudgments or material pressures. In both, the left, not excluding the use of force, not ashamed of it, and not calling it upbringing or benevolence or care for children, etc., nevertheless rejects any means of political warfare that lead to moral consequences which contradict the premise.
Chris had to sneeze.
Which, yes,
Bless you.
it made me misread that last line, which contradicts its premises. That's what I should have said. All this time, I have been describing the left as a certain ideological and moral attitude. For the left is not a single defined political movement or a party or group of parties. The left is a characteristic which to a greater or lesser degree can serve particular movements or parties, as well as given individuals or human activities, attitudes, and ideologies. One can be a leftist from one point of view and not from another. There rarely occur political movements that are totally leftist in every aspect throughout the entire course of their existence.
I like what he said just there. Like
Yeah.
that, I think this is important to like, just in case it's not clear. I have been describing the left as a certain ideological and moral attitude. Okay, good.
A man of the left can participate in the political struggle and be a politician in a leftist party, but refuse to approve actions and opinions that are clearly inimical to the leftist attitude, which does not mean, obviously, that the leftist position does not lead to internal conflicts and contradictions.
I would just need more here. It's like, okay,
Yes.
sure.
Okay, I bet there's more here. For these reasons, the left as such and as a whole cannot be an organized political movement. The left is always to the left in certain respects with relation to some political movements. Every party has its left wing, a current which is further to the left than the rest of the party in regard to some trait that can be cited as an example. Still, this does not mean that all leftist elements or all parties taken together form a singular movement, or that they are more closely allied to each other than they are to the party which gave birth to them. This would be so if they fulfilled all the requirements of being left in every aspect, but in that case they would not have been segments of so many diverse parties with such varied programs to begin with. The left wing of the Christian Democratic Party has, as a rule, infinitely more in common with them than the socialist left, yet it is the Christian Democratic left on this very basis. Its leftness may be shown by a stand on one or another actual political problems that, in the particular instance, brings it nearer to the left of other parties. For example, a condemnation of colonialism or racism. On the other hand, the demands of the left are met to varying degrees by different parties, which for this reason are called more or less leftist. Wow, that's a lot of words just to say that one sentence.
Yeah.
Can only be a leftist in relation to other things. One can only be leftist in relation to something else that determines whether or not it is to the left or to the right of that. I don't know. It's just.
I think this whole diatribe on leftness is just to sort of lay out the relationship between utopia and real, and how this is happening with what we call leftness all the time.
Yeah.
And that's not the only version of that. It's just it doesn't remain a constant North Star, I guess, which makes sense. Like why by this framework, none of us is none of us is the man who is purely a leftist, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Which I'm fine with.
I mean, we talked about Assad Haider, who recently passed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And remember when his book on identity politics came out? The man is clearly a leftist,
He's a Marxist.
He's a Marxist, but he was being called a fascist by a lot of people on the left because he dared critique identity politics at the time. That's one of the first things that we ever did on this podcast was read and discuss that book. Yeah. Rest in peace, comrade Assad.
Yes.
Can one speak of the pure party of the left, and if so, when? Is the Communist Party one? Since we cannot at this time define all communist parties, let us apply the question of the Polish Party. And he would pick the Polish Party as he is a Polish communist. For a long time, the division into a party left and right did not exist. Although some members were more or less to the left, it did not exist because the party was deprived of any real political life because its ideology did not grow out of its own historical experiences, but was to a large degree imposed upon it regardless of experience. The division into left and right was drawn only when the political life of the party came into being. The split took place according to positions on the problems that will always divide a movement into left and right. The party left was made up of all those who fought to abolish all forms of privilege in social life, to recognize the principle of equality in dealings among nations, and to oppose local and foreign nationalism, reserving the right to call it by its real name of nationalism. The left stands for the abolition, without the chicanery of all kinds of anti-Semitism in Poland, for freedom of speech and discussion, for victory over dogma and over dull doctrinaire or else magical thinking in political life, for legally public relations, for the maximum increase in the role of the working class within the system of government, for the liquidation of the lawlessness of the police. It fights against calling crimes communism and gangsters communists, and against thousands of other things. I am listing these items summarily without going into specifics, only to show the direction of the changes intended to lead to the triumph of socialist democracy was inspired in the party by its left, whose demands on all vital points are included in what we call the leftist position. The party right consists of the forces of Stalinist inertia, defending a system based on principles that renounce Polish sovereignty in favor of foreign nationalism. It supports the dictatorship of doctrinaire schema in intellectual life, the dictatorship of the police in public life, the military dictatorship in economic life. It suppresses freedom of speech and uses the terminology of government by the people to conceal government by political apparatus that disregards both the opinion of the public and its needs. The forces of Stalinism within the party were and are a concentration of all basic characteristics that define the right, conservatism, and reaction.
Go.
I feel like this is just not true. That the party was deprived of any real political life, and its ideology did not grow out of its own historical experience, but was to a large degree imposed upon it, regardless of experience. I don't know why you would say that. I don't think that's true.
I know why you would say it. I mean, the Polish Communist Party was like cut off from the Polish people. Like a lot of the Polish communists were in the Soviet Union in exile and came back when the USSR liberated Poland from the Nazis. Right? The Pilsudski government like persecuted and drove out the communists, and the Nazis, killed and drove out the rest of them that the Pilsudski government didn't persecute and drive out. So there's like this disconnection between like the organic movement of communists in Poland and the establishment of the communist government in 1945. I can see why he's saying that, right?
Yeah, okay.
But like, what's his name? Gomulka, the head of the Communist Party in the 1950s and 60s. I don't know how long he was the head of the Communist Party, was in a German concentration camp and was part of the Polish resistance. So it's not completely divorced from the political experiences of the Polish left. I would say I understand what he's saying. Like the Polish Communist Party and the Polish Communist State was created in the image of the Soviet Union by the Soviets, but it contained lots of elements of Polish communism that pre-existed it.
Yeah, okay. So that with that qualification, I would say, that then I agree. I just think that it's possible to mistake the Polish Communist Party and the Polish People's Republic as an importation of the Soviet Union over the heads of the Polish people, as though the Polish resistance was not led by communists from Poland, and as if they just had no say. And that part, so like I said, I agree with the asterisk that you just put.
But what's weird about what he's doing is like he's telling us left and right only exist in relation to one another. But then he references this as the right, conservatism and reaction, as though it has some kind of, as though it's existing in resonance with the right of the United States or something. It's like, it's just completely different. And to call like the Communist Party of Poland, the right. I don't know if that's terribly clarifying.
No, I
Right.
don't think
Well,
so.
to them, the Stalinist wing of the party is the right,
Yeah.
and I think that ends up being pretty ubiquitous terminology for communists from 1945 onward.
Of course. But Stalinism is not equatable to like the right in the West. It's its own thing.
Sure.
Right.
So it becomes he's doing interesting things where he's like clarifying conceptually and then rhetorically using phrases that seem to do the opposite.
Yeah. Oh, it's because when you're critiquing the usage of the words like leftist in other countries, then yeah, that's silly. But like if you're talking about it in my country where I'm from, then here, let me explain to you how it's okay to do. All right. However, the left in the Polish Communist Party finds itself in a peculiar position in which political tendencies do not cover a single unbroken gamut from left to right, but abound in complications. The forces of the left stand between the two rightist tendencies, the reaction within the party and the traditional reaction. This is a new historical development, awareness of which has arisen only in the past few years. It is yet a very restricted phenomenon, but its implications are international. We will refrain from describing the historical causes of this situation, which in a certain phase of its development created a crisis in the communist movement, and simply state that the new left appeared within the movement when it became apparent that the new right existed. We will not at this time take up questions of just how the old left degenerated and survived in the form of the right, a process of which the history of Stalinism furnishes an instructive example. But it does not seem that this process was caused by the mere fact that the left's coming to power. That is, it does not seem that the left can exist only in a position of opposition or in the possession of the power is incompatible with the nature of the left and leads inevitably to its downfall. So that's actually an interesting situation there. Like the preservation of the old reactionary right within the apparatus that existed in the post-war actually existing socialist states. Because if you look at like within the communist parties of these countries, you have people that were fascists and Trotskyists and anarchists all operating within like the structures of these states. Like in Hungary or in Romania, they absorbed the fucking Legion of the Archangel Michael, and the Hungarians absorbed the Arrow Cross, who were, violent anti-Semitic, but also anti-capitalist, and nationalist. So it's like it's pretty weird, and the way that incubates and just turns into these strange movements towards the 1980s and the 1990s. So when the Communist Party collapse and the Soviet Union collapses and the Eastern Bloc breaks up, you all of a sudden got a bunch of fucking Nazis and pop out of the communist parties. We're like, wait a minute, this is like officially prescribed ideology.
Right.
And, that these things could never have openly existed under the communist states, yet they just pop out like completely incubated, and, like ready to assert themselves in the new political order.
Right.
Well, yeah, it's kind of like inside of German social democracy, officially, the revisionist controversy was settled. Bernstein does not win. And so, yeah, we're done now. And so unofficially, it just kind of seeps into the party overall. This is why I think the National Front governments of the Warsaw Pact made some sense, and probably should, like the action program of the Czechoslovak Communist Party should have just been made into policy. We're like, okay, we're going to duke it out as to which way to pursue the development of socialism, rather than we're going to absorb everything into the Communist Party, because that's because ideology is it's slippery. You know, it's you can't just like abolish it so it's over now. It's not going to happen anymore. Ideology is the hell of a drug, you know.
Right, like these ideas need to be defeated, not just suppressed.
Yeah.
You know, and like they need to be defeated regularly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, just the futility of just outlawing ideology and then pretending like it doesn't exist for 70 years is illustrated very clearly in the experiment of the Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Let's see. For although the negation of reality is part of the nature of the left, it does not follow necessarily that reality must always be contrary to the demands of the left. History, it is true, provides countless experiences that seem to speak for such a view and tempt us to see the left as condemned to be in eternal opposition. Yeah, exactly. I think that leftists, when they're put in positions where they could seize power or could win, are stuck in this ideology of eternal opposition. Yet over the years, history has witnessed many setbacks to demands, for example, equality before the law, that subsequently, after centuries of suffering and defeat, became a reality. Love of martyrdom and heroics is as alien to the left as opportunism in a current situation or enunciation of utopian goals. The left's protests against the existing world, but it does not long for a void. It is an explosive charge that disrupts the stability of social life, but it is not a movement towards nothingness.
That's so good. I love that. I think that's
that
why
a lot.
this is such an interesting thing to read, right? Because we're having all these bones to pick, and then he just has this thing that's just a banger.
The weaknesses of the left.
Love of martyrdom and heroics is alien to the left. Yeah, I don't think that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the left loves nothing more than martyrdom and heroics.
Yeah.
But okay, maybe we can look at these his list here of their virtues, right? Maybe he's actually doing a bit of finger wagging towards his new left acolytes.
No, I'm sure. But yeah, I would say that that this is just me underscoring that this is the form of the left that he's discussing, the platonic form of the left, and not the left as it exists.
But Jason,
the main weakness of the left.
Wait. Jason, what do you think about this last passage, though? The left protests against the existing world, but it does not long for a void. I find that very...
I don't know.
I find that very compelling.
It is an explosive charge that disrupts the stability of life, but it is not a movement toward nothingness. I have to be honest, I'm just not sure about that. I'm not sure if that's even true. I think at the time it was true. I don't know if I could say that now.
Do we long for a void?
Not consciously, no. Not consciously, but I think... I don't know. I think a lot of the time... the truth is that there is this kind of left opposition in permanence. This attitude of always being the antagonist to whatever is at the moment. Maybe it's not like consciously a void, but in the absence of something, that I think that the nothing is what dominates.
I think what Chris said is key. This is the virtuous left. The left ought not long for a void, is how I'm reading it.
Right.
Whereas
I agree with that. Yeah.
Well, and I would say that this sentiment that we discuss regularly, where nothing good has ever happened in any of the colonial states, and therefore we have nothing to celebrate when we get a day off for the 4th of July or Thanksgiving or whatever else, and we have the workers' movements are nothing to celebrate because they happened in a colonial country, and we're all still colonists, and we all need to go back to where we came from, et cetera, and on and on and on. This maximalist, insane positions taken by online leftists that will never have any effect on society around them. Yeah, those people long for a void. They're nihilists. They're not They don't believe in constructing a real society. They have no real connection to a workers' movement. They're just they're longing for a void. They're just edgelords.
Does that mean
they're-
half of me should return to Wales and a quarter of me should
Yes.
return to Ireland and a quarter to Germany?
Yes, you have to chop off one of your arms and send it to Ireland, and I'll chop off the top half of me and send it to the Czech Republic, and the bottom half of me can go to various Northern European states. Okay. The main weakness of the left was not that it grew out of negation, but that its negation attained only the level of moral protest and not of practical thought. A leftist attitude that stops at the stage of moral experience has little practical effect. Bleeding heartism is not a political position. Damn.
Okay, now that yes, that's a really good passage.
Burn at Western left. Another trait, one that was unavoidable in our circumstances, was that the left could not be an organized movement, but only an unclear, fragmented, negative consciousness opposed to the right, but which was bound by no scruples of loyalty regarding the formation of splinter factions within the party. Thus, the left did not become a political movement in the true sense, but merely a sum total of spontaneous moral positions.
Damn.
Yeah.
One weakness of the left arose from the regressive circumstances of the international situation, the details of which I won't go into, but which distinctly favored rightist activities. Other weaknesses of the left were those elements of the immediate situation from which the efforts of the right could draw strength. The right has no scruples about using every kind of demagogy, every political and ideological slogan that will enable it to dominate the situation of the moment. When necessary, it makes use of anti-Semitism to gain a certain number of allies from the bigots within or outside the party. The right is primarily after power. It is in the fight for power, which, for example, does not possess in Poland today. It is prepared to advance any leftist slogans that can count on popular appeal. Let us speak openly. Contempt for ideology is the strength of the right because it allows for greater flexibility in practice and for the arbitrary use of any verbal facade that will facilitate the seizure of power. The right is backed not only by the inertia of old customs and institutions, but by the power of the lie. True only a little way, but far enough to... And, sorry, this cat is all up in my grill. But also by the power of the lie. True only a little way, but far enough to enable to master the situation. At a given moment, these ideological slogans are exposed as tactical imposture. But the trick is to make sure this moment comes only after the situation is in hand and the police are at one's disposal. This is why it is important for the left to have available at all times criteria of recognition in the form of attitudes towards those actual political matters, which, for one reason or another, force the right to reveal itself for what it is. Today, such criteria exist chiefly in the domain of international affairs.
Oh, that it were still.
Yeah. I don't really have anything to say about that.
Yeah, this is an account of internal party dynamics in another country in another century, and I don't know enough about it. I kind of do, and I might even say, oh, I'm sympathetic to this to some extent, but I don't really have much to say about it.
The left was also weakened by the fact that the general social protest against the compromised methods of the government were too often linked with reactionary demands unacceptable to the left. But at that stage of its development, the left was not strong enough to assume leadership of this protest. As a result of these circumstances, the left, on the international scale, could not help but be defeated. Nevertheless, if it is to exist, the left must above all be aware of the danger of its ideological position. Yeah, I mean, like, the movements for democracy within the communist countries after World War II were heavily, heavily infiltrated by, first of all, the CIA, but that's not even what I was going to say. I was going to say by reactionary elements of those societies that existed previously. If we look at two of the biggest uprisings, the ones that the ISO champions would have been the East German strikes against the government, which were instigated, funded, propagandized for by the CIA, and the Hungarian uprising, which was thoroughly top to bottom just run by the CIA with unwitting participation by workers and communists and who genuinely wanted democracy. The same thing could be said for the East German workers' strikes against the government there in the late 1950s. There was really just no way to be a dissident in the Eastern Bloc without being taken advantage of by Western intelligence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was tragic. It really was. There was really genuinely no possibility of third campism during the Cold War. There was the fiction of third campism, but the third campists were thoroughly in the pocket of the CIA in these countries, right? And it's a very disheartening and demoralizing realization to have come to after having been a third campus for my entire political life, up until a few years ago, really. But yeah, I don't know what to do with that information. Like, I don't think that you should not be a dissident when your principles are being opposed by the supposed representative of the workers' movement.
Well, he's about to lay out just how fraught and impossible it actually is to be surrounded.
Yeah, let's get into that.
Yeah.
The danger lies in its double exposure to two forms of rightist pressure. The left must be particularly alert to its need to define its special position as constantly and simultaneously opposed to both these forces. It must clearly and continuously proclaim its negative stand against both rightist currents, of which one is the expression of Stalinist inertia and the other is the inertia of capitalism, and its most backward and obscurantist cast. The left is in grave danger if it directs its criticism towards only one pressure, for it thus blurs its political demarcations. Its position must be expressed in simultaneous negation. The left must oppose Polish nationalism as adamantly as it does foreign nationalisms that threaten Poland, and it must take the same clear, rational attitude towards both the sclerotic religiosity of the Stalinist version of Marxism and the obscurantism of the clergy. It must simultaneously reject socialist phraseology as a facade for police states and democratic phraseology as a disguise for bourgeois rule. Only thus can the left retain its separate, distinct position, which is that of a minority. Nevertheless, the left does not desire to become the majority at any price.
Yeah, it's impossible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's laying out an impossible task.
I'm thinking about the Czech uprising, the
Prague Spring.
The Prague Spring, yeah. And fucking also in Poland, the solidarity in Poland.
Right.
Some of those actors began,
as I mentioned before, was solidly a CIA project, like top to bottom.
Yeah.
Solidarność was just riddled with Western intelligence activism and funded through the Vatican by the CIA, which was which was reaping the harvests of drug money in Afghanistan and Southeast Asia, laundering it in the Vatican Bank, and funneling it into Poland to support the trade union movement against the Communist Party of Poland.
It's really wild.
Yeah. Knowing all this shit is really depressing. I liked it a lot better when I thought of Solidarność as like a movement of workers that was at the very end hijacked by the capitalists.
Yeah.
Well, that's what the ISO taught me, That's
what they taught me too.
Life was a lot more comfortable and a lot clearer when it was simple.
The other thing, which maybe is another secret reason to long for Stalin, is that the USSR in its entirety is what made possible third way countries in the global south.
Exactly.
So I don't know what you're going to do with that either if you're a third campist.
Sure. I mean, and Yugoslavia too, taking IMF loans is one of the ways that it was able to stay a viable country while excluding itself from the Eastern Bloc. Let's see. In the current situation, the left's greatest claim is ideological. To be more precise, it has to differentiate exactly between ideology and its current political tactics. The left does not refuse to compromise with reality. As long as compromises are so labeled, it will always counteract any attempt to bend ideology to the demands of the moment to temporarily necessary concessions to tactics. While the left realizes that on occasion it is powerless in the face of crime, it refuses to call that crime a blessing. This is definitely not a trivial or secondary matter. A political party that does not rely on an authentic ideological base can exist for a long time in a state of vegetation, but it will collapse like a house of cards if confronted by difficulties, as did the communist parties of the former actually existing socialist states in Europe in the late 80s and early 90s. A case in point is the Hungarian Party. A communist movement that subordinates its ideology to immediate tactics is destined for degeneration and defeat. It can exist only with the support of the power and the repressive capacity of the state. The intellectual and moral values of communism are not luxurious ornaments of its activity, but the conditions of its existence. That is why it is difficult to create leftist socialism in a reactionary country. A communist movement whose sole form of existence is sheer tactics, which permits the loss of its original intellectual and moral premises, ceases to be a leftist movement. Hence, the word socialism has come to have more than one meaning and is no longer synonymous with the word left. And this is why a regeneration of the concept of the left is necessary. Also, so that we can delimit the meaning of socialist slogans. We therefore propose the term leftist socialism.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
I can't remember this person's name now. Vera Zasulich.
Yeah.
One of her kind of polemics against what essentially becomes the Bolshevik trend within Russian social democracy is basically this, that a communist movement whose sole form of existence is sheer tactics, which permits the loss of its original intellectual and moral premises, ceases to be a leftist movement. Okay, that because I do agree with her, and I think that's a good point.
I agree.
That the party is not just a vehicle for the workers to seize power. It's also it is the source of, or it should be, a regenerative source of the cleansing of the spirit.
Right.
And that's what makes this kind of red Jesuitism that Bukharin talks about later. I think that is the appropriate attitude. The appropriate attitude to have about such things.
Well, turns out Bukharin was the guy, man.
He really was.
You should have been him.
Well, the intellectual and moral values of communism are not luxurious ornaments of its activity, but the conditions of its existence. I completely agree with that. And it's funny you mentioned Bukharin, because I was just listening to just blanking on the name of your podcast with Matthew. I was just listening to the episode on the NEP.
Jason, what is the name of your podcast with Matthew?
It's Unbreakable.
It's Unbreakable Union.
Sorry, the Unbreakable Union. I was just listening to the NEP episode, and that was perceived by many as exactly this, like this horrible compromise to reality. But it was. I don't know what other path was there. So yeah, I mean, how does this part begin? In the current situation, the left's greatest claim is ideological. When has that not been the case?
Yeah.
It just so happens when you seize power, you have to try and hold on to it.
Yep. Without surrendering any of the premises of its existence, the left is obviously ready to make alliances with any groups, no matter how small, and with all leftist foci wherever they may be. But it must refuse to support rightist situations and activities, or if compelled to do so under duress, it must call this duress and refrain from seeking ideological justification for its actions. The left knows that these demands merely seem modest and realizes that they may lead to new defeats, but such defeats are more fruitful than capitulation. For this reason, the left is not afraid of being a minority, which is what it is on an international scale. It knows that history itself calls forth in every situation a leftist side which is a necessary component of social life, as its aspect of conservatism and as is its aspect of conservatism and inertia. The contradictions of social life cannot be liquidated. This means that the history of man will exist as long as man itself, and that the left is the fermenting factor in even the most hardened mass of the historical present. Even though it is at times weak and invisible, it is nonetheless the dynamite of hope that blasts the dead load of ossified systems, institutions, customs, intellectual habits, and closed doctrines. The left unites those dispersed and often hidden atoms whose movement is, in the last analysis, what we call progress.
Well done, Chris.
I like in general agree with the gist of this argument of this article, right? I have lots of nitpicky things to say about lots of things that he says, but in general, I agree with the gist of this argument. Though in our present contexts, is it useful to still continue talking about the left?
Yeah.
Because we've got a sort of hegemonic cultural sort of leftism in the United States, right? That like what we considered the project of the new left, marching through the institutions and gaining cultural hegemony, that was accomplished, right? Like all of the ideas of the new left are the ideas of our society in its most watered down, diluted, shitty, and least useful incarnations, right?
Yeah. I think
except
so
the class ones, which were abandoned.
Yeah. I agree with the underlying sentiment all throughout this article and the thrust of what he's getting at. I take issue with the concept that he puts it all behind. Like the left is a fermenting factor. The left unites those dispersed and often hidden atoms whose movement is, in the last analysis, what we call progress. I understand what he's saying, and I agree with what he's saying. I think in a very different way, this is what it's what I talk about often. This is what Hegel was talking about. This is what Hegel talks about often. That there is what we can call the cunning of reason. That there are going to be all sorts of sidesteps and seeming steps backward, and nevertheless, the movement of history is such that there's a thing called freedom that is coming into greater and fuller awareness of itself, and it is going to, by hook or by crook, and that even if the categories of our time do not map on to the categories of the previous era, so that we can't really speak in the same way about things like the left. That's fine, because there will be something.
Yeah.
That much I agree with.
Yeah.
I like what he says here when he says basically that the hope springs eternal. But I am very pessimistic about the details. But I agree with the underlying presumption completely.
Рабочие и крестьяне не смогут прожить без нас. Без нас некому будет установить порядок, определить работу, принудить к труду,